John Redwood.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are debating this afternoon devolution in England. But if we are to have more devolution in England, we first need to have devolution to England. We must make sure that there is an English level of decision making for the strategic matters and English ministers who can then decide which matters could be properly devolved within their strategic framework. If we take the case of transport, it is predominantly or wholly an English department, and yet it is treated as if it were a department of the Union. But our ministers have no control or influence over the roads of Northern Ireland or Scotland. They are predominantly dealing with English issues. And I think we first need to identify in the new looser federation, which we are going to be creating in the next Parliament, the need for England to have equal rights and opportunities to these powers that the other parts of the country have already gained or will be gaining in the more generous devolution settlements now being offered to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And if we then take the question of the English Transport Department, I think there is a good case for the English Transport Department devolving some more powers to unitary and to county and borough councils in the country. If we take, for example, the issue of railways, we have a very expensive nationalised industry which decides on the track maintenance, the track investment and the principal train routes and is responsible for the signalling and most of the stations. Now these are very important issues for local communities. They are massive budgets, but I found it extremely difficult as a local representative to get the ear of Network Rail and to get the right attention to the railway line in my area, even though my voters are producing a great deal of tax revenue which is going into Network Rail. So I think there is the case that can be made that there should be more devolved power to counties, to boroughs, to unitaries and maybe even to MPs over railway budgets, which can have a very important impact upon the face of the town, upon the nature of the countryside and upon the commuter and freight services available. But we also have to be careful not to devolve too much, because if we look at the road system, I think it is right that there is a strategic highway network of motorways and larger trunk roads which is controlled at the England level, masquerading as the Union level, and that those decisions should be properly taken by an English responsible minister to this House, spending monies collected in the normal national way and going through the national budgets. I hope we will in due course have a proper English devolved budget, just as Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland does. But in my area, it so happens that we have a motorway which is a local road. The council is responsible for the motorway. And it's a very useful and good motorway, but it stops at the boundary with Oxfordshire and with Reading. And most of us want it to go over the river and go on to more useful places as part of our economic growth and development. We are making a huge contribution in our area with a lot of extra housing and a lot of extra jobs, and we do need more road space. But Oxfordshire will not allow us to put a bridge over the river and take the road on to other parts of our burgeoning area and up towards Oxford. And so that may be a case where perhaps a devolved power should be given back. And I think my unitary borough would be happy to surrender control of that motorway in return for a promise from a government minister that they would finish the job and make it a motorway to other places so that it could take more of our traffic. Because at the moment, a very large amount of traffic has to go through my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary's neighbouring constituency, a small and beautiful village of Sonning, which has a single track bridge over a beautiful stretch of the river, and that takes a massive amount of commuter and freight traffic these days, which really ought to go on a motorway standard bridge away from a place of such great beauty. But we cannot do so because of the way local government relates to one another. So there are two examples, one where we could devolve more once we have the right powers in England, and one where we might want to devolve less to get a better strategic answer at the national level. If we take the health service, there again, this is primarily or wholly an English department. It's called the Department of Health, but it should really be called the Department of English Health, because of course ministers in that department do not run the health service in Scotland in particular, although in the recent debates over Scottish devolution, some people didn't seem to understand that point and seemed to think that somehow Scotland's vote would have an impact on their health service when it has been devolved to the Scottish Parliament. If we are going to pursue devolution, I think there English ministers should indeed ask the question which my right honourable friend the Chancellor has asked and started to answer for the case of Manchester. But if it makes sense for Manchester to have more control over health budgets at local authority level to try and deal with the very big border issues between social care and health, it must make sense for other parts of England to have exactly the same type of thing. And I look forward to seeing the more detailed work and the results of the negotiations. All my life in active politics and government, as a local government minister, and in other roles, Secretary of State for Wales, I was very conscious that there were always border issues between the nationally controlled health service in those days, UK-wide, and local government dealing with social care. And both sides were prone to blame each other. The health service would say we could get our costs down and put more people through our hospitals if only local government did a better job on providing care facilities for people who should leave hospital. And local government would say, well, our budgets have been starved, so much money goes to health, and maybe that isn't the right priority because it's obviously a lot more expensive to keep someone in a hospital bed for a few extra days when they don't need the urgent care anymore than to provide them with good care in a care home to a good standard without all the medical staff and additions that you have in a hospital. So there's always been that problem, and I look forward to seeing the detail because it would be good if there could be some kind of new solution. But once again, we need to make sure that the right things are defined at the England level, because it is still meant to be a national health service. It is now going to be several different national health services because of the Scottish and other devolution. But as far as England is concerned, I think a lot of our joint voters in this House in England want there to be national standards, a national level of service, national protocols, national agreements. So there has to be quite a lot which needs to be settled by an English national minister sitting in the English Health Department. But we can see if we can devolve certain things, and it would be really good if there is a new and novel solution to the cross-border issues between social care and healthcare. The third department, which is very clearly an English department already, is of course the Department for Local Government. And this is the origin of this debate. The Select Committee has produced an interesting report to influence English local government ministers. They must make sure that they have unrestricted English control over English local government. And then I'm sure many of them, in this government and successor governments, will be interested in exploring this big issue about how many more things can reasonably be left to councillors and their serving officers to decide for them. I look forward to there being more things. I've suggested one in the area of railways, but we need to be realistic. We need to understand that people also want a national agreed level of service. People also want to understand that where a decision in one place has a consequence on other places, people above the fray of the locality are going to be making the decisions. So not all the decisions will go downwards, sometimes have to go upwards. But above all, Madam Deputy Speaker, we need now justice for England. We need English votes for English issues. We need to make sure that England has a voice and England can decide the things that only apply to England.